Hey, real quick before we get started, Content Matters with a Z is our content marketing company that helps entrepreneurs tell their own stories to those who care. And here's the thing, we think every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform. And we want to help make that happen, both by working directly with entrepreneurs and by sharing our own stories, exploring the craft of content marketing. Content Matters, one piece of content at a time. Learn more at CasContent.com. Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, introspective podcast conversations helping build and protect your business one podcast at a time, a CasSource production. In this episode, I had the opportunity to join Kisan Patel on his podcast, Boss Move. We discuss becoming a business owner, stacking talent, and the unknown benefits of content creation.
How are you today, Eric?
I'm great, Kisan. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Hey, my pleasure. Maybe we could kick things off with your story and how'd you become a business owner?
I would go back to just being in school and just hating being told what to do. It's kind of that simple. And typically from teachers, middle school, high school. And so I always realized that I felt like I wanted to be the boss, but I didn't know enough. Obviously, my dad was a business owner. My grandfather was a business owner. So it was ingrained in me. But I had to go and I had to live life and I had to experience things. And meaning you have these great jobs that you get out of school. And what happens is, when you come back from vacation and you don't have a job anymore, you realize, wow, like you really don't have a lot of control. And that happened to me. I came back from a vacation and had these 3 weird voicemails. And I looked at my wife, who we were newly married, and I said, I think I just got laid off. And sure enough, going the next day and security escorted me to my desk to pick up my personal belongings and out the door you go. And that was everybody at the company. But, at that time, I really wasn't ready for it. Ended up in an insurance brokerage group and did very well. And, you're working for people that pretend to be your best friend. And, when you're out to dinner and everything's going well until they think you're making too much money. So they want to change your comp plan. So you stack that on top of companies buying and selling your company. And so 3 times later, I ended up working for a bank overnight. And I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a banking finance capital besides like a New York or San Francisco, and never wanted to work for a bank until I woke up one morning that worked for a bank. And at the same time, I had been thinking about like, hey, now is my time. Now is my opportunity to do really what I want to do and start my own business and get out of my own way and go and do it. And that's what I did. And so that's how I became an entrepreneur and started my own business.
Good story.
Yeah.
Good motivators to get in your own path.
Yeah. It takes nerve. It's nerve-wracking. It's like putting yourself out there. It's like being on a podcast or creating some content. It takes a lot and it takes time. But for me, I felt like I had to put in my time and my effort. And then there's realizations that you have to say, now is the time. Go do it. Go make it happen. And then you find people who will support you along the way, give you encouragement. You'll find people who will wonder, like, what are you doing? This is a mistake. Why are you doing this? But if you believe in it, you just go for it.
What are your top 3 principles that attribute to success?
Well, I heard that question. And one thing I'll say is iteration is important. So I'll change my principles or the philosophies as I go. It doesn't mean like my philosophy changes, my core thesis changes, but as I learn and accumulate more, I don't know if to call it knowledge, but insights perhaps, and go through more life experiences, those things will change. But there's a few things that come to mind, and probably the list is way longer than 3, but as I was thinking about it as it relates to what I'm doing right now, Scott Adams, who is a creator of Dilbert, as a podcaster, talks about stacking talent. And whenever I heard that, it stuck with me. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And you think about like stacking talent is stacking the different things that you've learned, and we can get more into that type of stuff. Obviously, creating content is huge. And I think it just opens up opportunities that you know exist and the opportunities that you don't know that exist. And the last one I would say is the authentic leverage. So building authentic leverage. Authentic is a word that's thrown around probably too much. And I probably shouldn't use it, but it's important because it matters. And authentic leverage, having that in your wheelhouse of what you do every day is also important. But kind of going on from that, I mean, it's just having a good mindset. Mental health is huge. So you have to really think about that on a consistent basis. And that goes into many things. And one last one. So this is not 3, but again, I'm just kind of giving some different topics that we can go down, is being useful and finding things that you can be useful doing, everything from doing the dishes to doing the work to cleaning your office to having great conversations to being useful for other people. I think that's something that is undervalued a lot in everyone's day. And that also lends itself into the mindset that you have when you're doing things. So
You start off with this sort of underpinning principle around iteration, because that's the key to it, is you got to keep pushing and learning and improving. But this is where it gets fun. We're going to take your principles apart and try to turn them into more practical how-to so somebody can actually make it part of their daily practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's start with stacking talent.
Yeah. Well, just look at it from the standpoint, I worked at an insurance brokerage company. So our clients were wealth managers at large wirehouses, banks, financial advisors, property and casualty agencies. And here I am running a content marketing company. So how is that even possible? Well, the only way it's possible is to really dive into something that you have a passion about and learn about it, read about it, talk to people, interview people. And I think there's so many different variations of it. So, like in the insurance business, you have to understand how to build a relationship. You have to understand the financial markets. You have to understand insurance companies. You have to understand how to communicate, how to sell. Then you start getting in the marketing side of things. You have to understand how to create content, how to build a website, how to have a conversation on video, how to have a conversation in person. And you record that conversation and edit that conversation and publish it. So some of these things are small technical things, but communication in itself, technology, these are large, overarching talents that someone could have. When you start stacking these things on top of each other, you become very unique in what you do. And that is what stacking's all about. That's in the talent side of things. But then I mean, you can just stack industries, right? So if you have an interest, let's say in insurance, and then you have an interest in the marketing world and content, all of a sudden now you're stacking different things that you do, and you could become the only person that does what you do. And I never really had thought about it that way. But when I started hearing it and thinking about it and reading more about it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And then you start looking around and you start to see all the individuals that are very unique in what they do. And it's because they've stacked all of these different things together. That word might not be used in that way, but you see it come out. And I think it's very applicable. I think anyone could look at, like, what are they good at? Right? Someone might be really good at technology, but they're not good at communication, but they're really good at drawing. They're really good at graphic design. They're good at putting things together. That, who knows what those things are? But I think if people really take a hard look at what they're good at, they'll find this unique talent, as opposed to trying to be the best graphic designer in the world. Like, good luck. That's not easy to do. But if you're a great graphic designer and a great coder and a good bicycle rider, I don't know, like, you pick the thing, all of a sudden that becomes very unique to what that person can do. They can start building an app for bicycle riders that bicycle riders just love and have to have. And I think that's where the talent stack came in. I mean, those ideas I'm just throwing off the top of my head right now, but
it's interesting because even being a leader requires a diverse set of skills. And I think you have a good point around acknowledging that, because understanding that will allow you to challenge yourself to build different types of skills. How do you know what are the types of skills or areas that you should be focusing on? That took me a while to learn.
Yeah.
But it was stuff that it wasn't obvious. It was things that, I tried this and then realized, like, wow, learning about organizational psychology was a lot better than reading about leadership in terms of building leadership skills.
Yeah. I think it's giving yourself some time, giving yourself some patience to explore and discover these things that, like you said, like, sometimes it's obvious, other times it's not so obvious. And you have to give yourself some freedom to think through it, and you have to have patience. So there's no doubt about it. And here's the other thing. If you think there's something there, lean into that. Lean into whatever that is and give that some time. And you'll know sometimes, again, who knows, but you'll come across something to say, this is worth pursuing. So I want to lean more into this wall and knock this thing over. Or is this wall just like too hard and I'm not getting there? And maybe you just put it to the side for a while and just get it off of your radar and just be done with that. But I think just giving yourself some time and some patience and then leaning into whatever that thought is. And I guess it takes it would be like some emotional intelligence of like how you're feeling about things. Is this worth going? And you're going to be wrong. I mean, right? Let's face it. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be like, why did I do that? I shouldn't have gone down this path. But you did. And so what can you do with it? What can you make with it now?
That you can build on. What about when, in terms of forms or sources of learning and developing skills?
How are you learning, you mean?
Yeah, you can read books. You can find video tutorials now. You can network and find mentorship with other people you connect with. Is there anything in terms of an approach to developing skills that you found work really well for you?
Yeah, it's all of it. Before I started CASSource, I started taking reading seriously. I mean, I read when I was younger and I read what I liked, but I didn't read. I mean, I didn't take it serious. And I love sports. I watch sports. I was always inquisitive. I would go to the bookstore and I would check things. I just didn't take it serious. And then I took it serious. I mean, I took it really serious and I started reading like a lot. And then podcasts became a big deal. And I started listening to podcasts and I was just fascinated by, wow, there's just all this information out there and I could go learn about it or just listen or just, there's a lot of noise in your head, especially when you're thinking about starting something new. It's scary. And I would get these thoughts in my head that were they would take over. So the only way to block that out at the time, I have other ways of doing it now, but at the time was to read and to listen. More information helped me kind of balance myself, stay grounded. And so I think reading other stories about the extreme examples, like these basic stuff, like a Phil Knight or a Steve Jobs or Amazon, like these are extreme examples. But hearing the story of like someone had to run across the street to the bank at Amazon to make sure their credit line didn't close because Amazon doesn't exist today if their credit line. I mean, I was like, oh, that's fascinating that this company had those issues. Phil Knight going overseas and being like, they're like, do you have East Coast distribution? He's like, yeah, of course we do. And he didn't. You know, to go tell his friend, like, you got to move to the East Coast. So reading and thinking through all those things. And just as you do that, you start to challenge yourself even more with the books that you're reading and the podcasts that you're listening to and the people that you're having conversations with. So constantly learning, and then also like not taking yourself too seriously and not believing that it's like this paradox, maybe like, don't get so caught up in yourself that you really got to figure it out, to a point to also say like, you do belong, like you do know what you're talking about. You spend a lot of time doing this. So taking chances. And instead of just learning all the time, because I've seen that before, like in the insurance business, you'll see these people with the alphabet after their name because they're designated out to the gills. That's great. I'm not saying that that's bad, but have they ever gone out and sold something, ever done something? And I'm not saying that they haven't done that, but at some point you have to take action. So you can sit back and learn and read everything in the world, but until you actually do something about it, that doesn't matter. So it's also that. It's just going out there and applying it and then iterating it. Doesn't mean like setting yourself up to fail, but it does mean learning and applying and continuing on that.
Those are great points. And I'm totally with you about reading. I did not understand the value of reading growing up until I got into my 30s and realized, whoa, this is how you learn. This is how you develop the skills you want. You just need to know how to use it and pinpoint the areas that you want to develop. So totally agree. It took a long time for me to learn that.
Yeah.
Which goes into the next principle, because you made a good point that you can overlearn. And I noticed with my kids, I'm like, you just spent the whole day absorbing content, whether you're playing video games on YouTube, TikTok. I'm like, you need to create content. That's where the value is.
Yeah.
And I challenge him. My youngest, he got his phone back. I'm like, try to do 50-50. Try to go create some content and challenge yourself a little bit. It's hard enough to get him to read. So that's like step one. But I'd love to hear, how do you take creating content and make that into a practical practice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said it right there. It's so true. It's this consumption versus production time. And what I realized is I was the consumer. And early on, when I was reading a lot, and it was like, well, wait a second, I can actually be on the production side. Well, that's going to take some nerve to actually go put yourself out there. And who's going to listen to me? Like, what do I have to say that's going to offer any sort of value? And then you kind of get out of your own way and you have conversations with people and they're intrigued by what you're saying. You're like, well, you know what? You don't have to do it for everybody. Like, not everyone can be Tony Robbins if that's what you want to be, or, you know, any of these things. It's, you have something to say, so say it. So get away from being on the consumption side and go produce something, write an article, just write something and see what happens. And so I agree with that, like from the kid standpoint, and looking at it from that elementary standpoint is, don't be caught just being the consumer, actually go out and produce something. And so early on, it was like, I'm going to not just take in all the time. I want to have output. And I don't know what that means. I didn't know what that means. And sometimes you still don't, but you realize that you know what you can get from it. And then there's the unknown that you do not know that could happen. As an example, your team reaching out to say, Eric, we would like to feature you on this podcast. That doesn't happen if I don't have a website, if I don't have content, if I don't have a podcast that your team can go and listen to. It's a small example, but it's an example to say, if you put yourself out there, things can happen. Yeah. Is it a conversation? Someone could say, well, what does that mean? I don't know yet. Maybe it's just a conversation where I get to talk to you, Kisan, and we learn from each other and have a good chat and on we go. And who knows? Or maybe there's something more that comes from it, from someone else that got to hear the podcast. Who knows? But I know that if you're out there in the production mode, good things can happen.
I feel like creating content, the hardest part is getting started. As you go through it, you've probably seen this, where there's this like velocity curve. It doesn't happen day one or first month. I think these days it's so competitive. You got to have your head in it for well over a year, and then you start seeing it.
Yeah.
How do you get to that person? Because I can remember myself, I spent months and months talking about doing a podcast, reading and researching before I actually hit the record button. And I feel like that's the struggle point for most people. They have an idea, they swear they're going to start something soon, but then that starting point gets pushed back further and further.
Yeah, it's very hard to get started. And I mean, whether it's getting started starting a business or getting started creating content or whatever it is, that thing that is that you're doing. I mean, just go back to being a kid. Like, if you want to take tennis lessons, there's my daughter was going to dance. Like that first day of school, it's really hard to do. So it's not a surprise that people would have a hard time doing it. Not to mention, you have all these people that you know in your life, and all of a sudden you're going to put yourself out there in front of them with a podcast, a blog, a video, or whatever that is. It's scary. And people are going to laugh at it. People aren't going to like it, but maybe it's not for them. And so how do you get started? Like, it's hard to do it. There's no two ways about it. I do know this. It's a path. Like if you go back and see anyone's beginning of their content, it's probably not their best content, right? Like no matter who that person is, that's okay. And there's so much being created now. You get to this point, and at least I had, that you just didn't care anymore. You're not thinking about the person and what they're thinking back at you. And if you are, then that's more stuff to work through. But I believe there's this path to better content. I really do. And I've seen it play out with, I mean, I guess you'd call them like, say, high-end running large companies, or they've been very successful already. And they'll start with the bells and whistles and why we're such a great company to work for. And it's kind of like, this is kind of this crawling here. And this is, but you know what? Go down this path, keep doing it. And then they open up. Then they tell the story of when they were working at the bar and two people walked in and they were mesmerized by what they were doing. And they reached out and they said, I want to learn from you. And then there are these other stories that you didn't think that it was there, but it was there. And it just starts coming out. And what happens is they get to this point and it becomes one of the best things that they do with their day is just creating the content because of all the good stuff that comes with it. And what is all that good stuff? It's endless. I mean, it's just, there's so many different, did it make you money? Possibly. Maybe it just made you a better person. Maybe you're on this aim of just doing good things, of being useful, of training your team, of having new connections and having good conversations. That's the path you go down. But like you said, this doesn't happen overnight. So when we work with people and they're trying to get their story out, or they're creating content, this isn't like some ROI you get in the first 2 weeks. And if that's what you're looking for, that's not the path. And I would say go buy some ads or go do some Facebook marketing. And not to say that those are bad, but try to go sell something, cold call people. This is just a different way of doing it.
That's true. You got to push yourself, get it going, start somewhere, build off of it. We'll get better over time. And I think this also ties back to the first principle around stacking talent, because you end up creating a lot of good, positive communication skills from doing it.
Oh, yeah. And that all leads to stuff, right? Like we have people here that found us on Twitter. I remember people would say like, Twitter's a waste of time, or this social media. And social media is just a tool. That's all I see it. It's just a current day tool that you can do what you want with it. I mean, you can get real negative with it. You can have a lot of problems with it, but you create some content, you put it out there. Next thing you know, someone reaches out to you and you can engage with, they know a little bit about you. They know maybe you had an interest in sports, or you traveled here, or you went to school in Charleston, South Carolina. And they're like, they want to talk to you about that. Well, those are icebreakers. And those icebreakers lead to more things, or you have more conversations. And so, okay, well, that's something to start a conversation about and end up wanting to work with you. But yeah, I mean, all these different things add up to being, like you said, stacking these things that you've spent so much time learning. You might as well put it to use in a genuine way.
Authentic leverage.
Yeah. We touched on that a little bit already. In a way, I'm on this podcast right now. That's what's an example of it. If leverage is you can get something out of something else, well, leverage is another word that could be negative, right? It could be like you're taking advantage of something. Well, I think of it as like in code or media. Like if I could code something and I could go to bed, and while I'm sleeping, the code's working for me, that would be awesome. That's like an app in the App Store. How cool is it if you could build that and it sells for $3.99, and every time you've done all the work, so I don't have to recreate it. Yeah, I have to continue to update it. But if I could do that, I can make money while I'm sleeping. I could have things happening for me while I'm sleeping. Media is the same thing. I could have this conversation with you, and perhaps I could have different versions of the conversation, but this conversation will be posted on your website. It'll be posted on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and so on and so forth. And someone might hear it one day. Who knows? Maybe it's a future employee. Maybe it's someone who wants to work with us. Maybe whatever. That's leverage in the sense that I don't have to have that conversation with them. They could hear this conversation. That's leverage. Or leverage of getting found in some other way, like you said, of being on this podcast. Those things are critically important for a business leader to create that awareness around what it is that they're doing and what it is that's for their company. So when I go to people on my team and I ask, what do you want me to work on? What do you want me to do? You're just curious. Like, they have insights, they have desires, they have all these things that are going on. What do you want me to do? Continue to have great conversations with interesting people. Have these introspective conversations. Do that over and over again. And people are intrigued by what it is we're doing. And they ask questions of, what do you do? And then off we go. And that's the leverage that I'm talking about. And I think you get that through media. And I want to help other people do it. I've seen it happen. I mean, again, run an insurance company, create content. The content, then some business owner comes to me and says, can you do that for me? Not exactly what you're doing, but can you help me create a content platform where I can help tell my story that'll help him and his business out? Yes, we can do that. That was leverage that started because we had content out there. That content allowed for that conversation to take place. That's leverage.
So, I mean, would this build off the prior principle of creating content? It's just that authentic component of it, of you really being passionate on the subject and those components, and then leveraging it through content where you're able to get that distribution out there without having to personally go talk to people.
Yeah. Well, you could do content for a lot of different reasons. I mean, a lot of people want to start a podcast because they want to run ads, and that could be leverage. You got ads because now you run a podcast and Nike hears about it and they want to run an ad on your podcast, or who knows, right? So you get that, and that's good leverage, but there's so many other ways to do it. You could have 2 people listen to your podcast and it can have success. You don't have to be Joe Rogan or Taylor Swift in the music industry. Like, good luck. I'm not saying don't go for it. Go for it. Go be the next Taylor Swift. That'd be awesome. But we all know that's not that easy to do. If it happens, like, she's not out there thinking that she's going to be Taylor Swift. Her record deal was turned down numerous times. Well, then it happens and you take off and people talk about fame and how that happened. But the conversations that you're having, if one person listened to it, that one person could change quite a bit. And it doesn't even have to move the needle that much. It could just be a little bit. Or it's just no one listens to this conversation. I'm enjoying our conversation right now. I think we're getting into some depth and you're making me think a little bit and so on and so forth. Maybe you'll learn something from it, or maybe you hang up, you're like, that guy's crazy, right? That's okay. But that's what I believe. Just continuing to have these types of conversations, whether it's through audio, video, text, you name it, social media.
Yeah, it sounds like part of it is that the authenticity part's where I'm latching on, because it's got to be something that you are really passionate about. It's not, hey, I'm just going to try to be Taylor Swift to get the numbers. And I think that's where you find your own domain.
Yeah. And it comes off if it's not. So like, consistent messaging is huge. If it's not consistent. So if we stop this podcast and let's say you and I hopped on a call 3 weeks from now, or we're just talking, you would know immediately if you're like, man, that podcast is not who this person is. Or you could go check out our content or social media or whatever. Listen to a podcast that I've done. They're going to be very consistent. You'll talk to someone on the team. You know, there's John's on our team here, and John started interning for us. And he kind of bucked the trend a little bit, and he had scored his job out of college before he ever left college. It was really cool. In his own way, it makes sense. I talked to Eric, and I'm talking to John and all these different people, and there's a consistent message that's there. So that is authentic, and that's your brand. And if it's not, and that's, again, another words thrown around a lot, but it is important. And if it's not consistent, you'll see it. Because I see it all the time. I see it with people reach out on LinkedIn and this and that. And next thing you know, they're like immediately trying to go for the sale. Hold on a second. What just happened? You're saying this, and then the messaging just changed. So that was a game. And I feel like I just got put in someone's funnel. And I just don't like that. I don't like going to buy a car at the car dealership because I know what they're doing. I know immediately when, always, right? I could be wrong. But I think a lot of people do. So I'm not alone in this. You know when the sale's on. Like, you're trying to pitch me something. So all that stuff you said, it's not consistent. You lost me.
If you're looking for your areas of focus, what you're passionate about, for somebody that's trying to figure that out, hey, is this stuff I'm generally interested in? I think one of the things I've learned recently is that you don't have to be a person that's experienced for decades to sort of really know something. You can learn it more recently and actually be better equipped to teach it to other people since it's fresh in mind.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, is it simply that, hey, this is stuff I'm interested in, passionate about, or because I feel like you can easily get hooked into trying to catch the wave of what's trending.
You can, and marketing has that, just like fitness has that, just like a lot of industries have, like, ooh, this is the next thing. I'm going to become a fitness instructor on Instagram. Okay. Yeah. Until we realize that you don't know what you're actually doing. Thank goodness, though, that you can keep up. you can change paths. Like back in the day, it was like, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a school teacher, you can be a principal, whatever those things are, you're going to be. You would set that determination probably when you're in college. And that was it for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Because information traveled at a much slower speed. Well, nowadays it's different. You really could go learn to whatever it is. You want to go learn to play the guitar, go learn to play the guitar. You want to learn how to be a better writer, go learn to be a better writer. All these things can happen. Sometimes it's out of necessity. I mean, I can give my wife as an example. A few years ago, she was diagnosed with celiac disease. Well, she's not feeling well. And there's a lot of different things going on. She took it upon herself to learn about it. Well, now she's getting her master's in applied nutrition. So she's taking it to that next level. It doesn't have to be the thing that you studied for 20 years. You could be this person that's like, I don't know anyone else that knows as much as her about this topic, to the point where she was the one who diagnosed with 3 kids, my 2 daughters, with celiac disease. She didn't diagnose them, but she was able to say, I want to get them tested. Well, it turns out they had celiac disease. Well, it was out of necessity that for herself. And if she didn't know, I don't know if my daughters ever would have been diagnosed, because she was able to advocate for them and push to get them diagnosed. And all of a sudden, what starts happening is I'm trying to learn about it because I don't understand it. And I'm trying to figure this thing out. You start having conversations with people in and around the community where people have celiac, right? Celiac Disease Foundation, and on and on and on. You meet these amazing people, and all of a sudden these new doors are open to have, just, if nothing else, you have these amazing conversations with people that really understand where you're coming from. And there's this commonalities, common ground. And I don't have it, but I can at least speak from someone who doesn't have it, that has a family that has it. But from my wife's standpoint, it's necessity that leads to all these things, to say, you're just passionate, ingrained in it. You just want to take as much in as you can and talk to more people.
I like that example because your wife found her passion through a problem she had to solve or overcome.
Absolutely.
Which is another unique way of looking at it. What are problems you're really passionate about solving?
Yeah. A lot of times that's it. They created the business. Well, I mean, again, going back to the extreme example, Steve Jobs is like, these MP3 players are a joke. And they were sitting in their room, like messing with them. And like, these are stupid. Like, we got to be able to create something better. And then they create the iPod. And well, then they iterate. And, now we have all these crazy devices that we can use and communicate with. And it's amazing what you can do with it. But it was like, I want to listen to music, and I don't want it to be this big pain in the butt to listen to music. So let's go create something for that. And so I think, how do you do it? Again, I think it's leaning into it. Writing's another one. Writing and talking, whether you're writing just for yourself and you're journaling, or you're writing a blog post, or just who knows what you're going to do with that piece. Just write. And I think you can write through things. And you might have an idea. I would just say, go write about it, or go talk to someone and maybe hit the record button and then learn from it and think about it. Therapy, man, talk to someone else. Talk to someone outside of your own world. Have conversations with those people. And here's the other thing. There's no prescription for this. That's something else that I would say is, I would always look for early on, like, what are the 3 things? What do I have to do? What's the prescription? You got to tell me. Like, there's different variations of all these things. It's like, what's your own recipe? And you got to figure that stuff out. And people will help you along the way, but there is no exact prescription. You can get pretty far with it. But if you're like looking for more and trying to do even different, who knows what you're trying to accomplish, there is no prescription, I don't think.
Eric, what's the best mistake you've ever made?
Man, what's the best mistake? Wow. Well, maybe I could go into, I'll keep it in like kind of the business thing and touch base on what we've been talking about here. But I was all in on this insurance business I was running and thinking about these other things, to a point where I got everyone involved. And we had a very large insurance deal we were working on. And it was a good year in the making, and everything was coming to a head, and it was going to happen, to a point where it did happen, right? Done deal. Pretty awesome. Everyone in and around us was very excited. And I called some shots, right? I got some deals. I got some exceptions. We got some things pulled off. And in the insurance industry, you have 10 days to free look a policy. This is life insurance. And it's very rarely ever used. And if it's used, it's not for these reasons. Well, I get a call on the 10th day. I'm sitting at my desk, and the individual I have a really good relationship with said, you're not going to believe this, but he wants his money back. And this is the type of person that jokes a lot. I said, you're just kidding. You're just joking. And I remember getting up from my desk, walking downstairs, sitting on a park bench. He was not joking. And I realized that there's a lot of people that lost out in this. And it was, I guess, financial, but a lot of time and effort. And you win some, you lose some. And that's the way business goes. And it really bothered me. But it was also the realization at that moment that I needed to go all in on this content thing that I've been talking a lot about. because I felt like we weren't in control. You're never fully in control, but we were like really not in the middle of this thing. And being that third party didn't feel right anymore. And it was time to do something else. So I still have the insurance company, and I'm more in it from a oversee vision relationship standpoint, like running the company, but my time and efforts in the content. And so I have good people who can handle the insurance side, but it was really seeing that I needed to go all in with this mindset of content and just go down that path and not get stuck into, hey, I could have just tried to fix that. No, it was time to really do it.
Gave you the push to pursue your passion.
Absolutely.
Eric, thank you so much for your time today. I enjoyed this conversation and learning about your principles.
Yeah, I enjoyed this as well. Thank you so much. I know it's a lot. I appreciate all this that you're doing, and podcasting. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for me when I started my business. And it's a reason why I got into podcasting, quite frankly, because I knew it helped me and it could help someone else, even if it's just someone on my team. So you doing the same thing, it's pretty awesome. So thank you.
One of my favorite things about CADSource is the opportunity to chat with amazing business leaders and entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit us at cadsource.com. Thank you for listening to this CADSource production, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time.
Play my cards right. Up the ante, one blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. What are the odds I got stayed?
Content Matters with a Z is our content marketing company that helps entrepreneurs tell their own stories to those who care. And here's the thing. We think every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform. And we want to help make that happen, both by working directly with entrepreneurs and by sharing our own stories, exploring the craft of content marketing. Content Matters, one piece of content at a time. Learn more at CAScontent.com.